Thank you, Bravna, and I'm really pleased to be here today at this event and give you this keynote. So without any further delay, I'm going to share my screen and start the presentation. So I hope you can all see my screen. So as Bravna said, my name is Lofred Madzou, AI project lead at the forum. And today I just want to give you a few insights on how to scale responsible AI across your organization, regardless of the industry that you are part of. So these are quite generic advice, but I hope they will be useful, and I'm happy to follow up with you by email or on LinkedIn if you have any question. First, let's start by establishing some context and looking at what are these governance challenges. So here I just give you a few examples. Obviously, there are much more AI governance challenges depending on the industry, depending on the use cases, but I think these are some of the three most important to have in mind. First one I want to touch upon is AI systems are heavily reliant on data, and this incentivizes companies to massively collect personal data, causing potential privacy issues in the process. That's a classic issue. That's why we have a GDPR. That's why there's so much conversation around data privacy. But I still want to stress this point again, the importance of having a very sound governance processes and making sure that as you collect personal data, you get consent, and overall you are compliant with regulation on privacy, starting with the GDPR. The second risk I want to stress is collecting, cleaning, and processing high-quality data is a costly and complex task, and consequently, business data sets often don't accurately reflect the real world. And that point is quite, I think, important. The truth is, in most industries and most businesses, there is an issue regarding data quality. Having the right data to perform any given task is a real challenge, and as a result, likelihood is that your data sets don't reflect the diversity of the demographics that are going to use your products or interact with your system. And this may lead to biases. Some of these biases would impact the business return or business value of your systems, but also may create some adverse effects on demographics. For instance, if you use AI for creditworthiness assessment, this idea that your data set is really skewed or biased may adversely impact some demographics. So keep this in mind and try to make sure that you build the most comprehensive or reliable data sets as you deploy this on end users, and that's specifically relevant for consumer-facing companies. Third one is AI-powered systems evolve data and use, and therefore the behaviors are hard to anticipate. And when they misbehave, they're harder to debug and maintain. And that's what makes AI systems, machine learning systems specifically, very different from classic programming. And I will come back to this in my presentation, but keep this in mind that your system is going to evolve. So whatever risk mitigation processes you have anticipated or built at the design stage, while the system is in operation, likely it's going to requires additional scrutiny and oversight. Now, how do you address some of these challenges? First one, you define what responsible AI means for your company. And this sounds trivial, but that's quite important actually, because the benefits and risks associated with your AI system is really context dependent. So using AI again for creditworthiness assessment or for recruitment or for boarding a plane with your face are very different use cases with different implications. So as a result, you need to think, as you deploy AI across your organization, you need to think about the risks that are related to the specific use cases that you are exploring or deploying on production. And as you think about this, you can start thinking about some of the principles that should govern the use of AI in your very specific context. Second one, build organizational capabilities. And here, that's something I always stress with companies that I work with, is designing and deploying trustworthy AI systems should be an organization-wide effort. It requires some planning, cross-functional and coordinated execution, employee training, and significant investments. The mistake will be to just hire a chief ethical officer or chief responsible AI officer and with limited resources and think that he or she alone is going to figure out the whole governance processes. What is much more important is how do you build these capabilities across your organization? And one advice I always give is investing in a center of AI excellence for training and driving adoption of responsible AI practices is quite an effective means to make sure that you have this network of actors and employees with the required skills to execute on your strategy and really scale responsible AI. Facilitate cross-functional collaboration. That builds on the previous one, but here I want to insist on who should be at the center of that network of actors and employees with the right skills, the risk and compliance officers. And this may sound obvious to some of you, but one of the challenges that always face companies that there's a mismatch or disconnect between the data science teams that are usually the champions of implementing or introducing AI within the companies, and the risk and compliance officers who don't have the proper skills or don't feel confident enough to properly map out, build, and implement and execute the right governance processes to effectively mitigate the risk that comes with AI systems. So they should be at the center of that network and that strategy, and making sure that they work in close collaboration with other business departments and specifically with the data science teams. Adopt a moralistic performance matrix. And that's also an issue that I've seen again and again across industries in my time at the forum, but even before. Currently in the industry, AI systems are usually assessed based on their average performance on benchmark data sets. And practitioners and researchers have acknowledged that's quite a limited approach to performance and a quite problematic one, and they're actively investigating alternative methods. One way to look at performance more holistically is to relate this to your AI principles that you should have defined, and which is the first recommendation I gave like earlier in the presentation. As you start thinking about explainability, bias, privacy, even if you have like more qualitative principles, you need to be able to quantify the impact of your systems across these requirements. What is the impact of my system on privacy? What is the impact of my system on the end users, and how I make sure that that system is actually explainable, it can provide a reliable explanation. As you do so and you build these processes, you're going to be able to have a more holistic understanding of performance of your system, not narrowed as previously on the benchmark data sets, but a much more, I would say, a realistic impact of your system as you deploy it into production. Define clear lines of accountability. So to do the right thing, employees must have the right incentives and be recognized for doing the right thing. And that's one of the biggest challenges that responsible AI practitioners are reporting. As part of my work, I interact with many of them across industries, and that's something that keeps coming back. And here I always gave like these two remedies. The first one is you should introduce a vetting process, either as part of your AI products pre-launch review or independent of it. And that vetting process is going to help you make sure that these responsible AI practices and processes are being implemented, respected before going into production. The second one is, no one likes to bring in the bad news, but if that bad news is going to help on the long run, you should be rewarded for that. And that's really important that, for instance, risk and compliance officers are not only incentivized, but also rewarded when they identify problematic, behaviors in the system in collaboration with other teams, but also take the time to introduce the right safeguards and mitigation processes with the data science teams. This shouldn't be seen as a delay, but again, as value creation, and should be rightly taken into consideration during annual performance assessment. What is the way forward? I gave you this, identified few challenges at the beginning. I went through 5 remedies. Again, it was a bit high level, but as I said, that's more like starting the conversation than giving you specific answers to your case, to your company. As with any important challenges in life, the first steps are usually the hardest. And I hope that our guide will help business leaders navigate this transition phase. We would like to encourage them to persevere, because in the long run, responsible AI-driven companies are likely to be the most competitive. And that's something I keep insisting on. Being responsible doesn't come, it's not just for the sake of it, or being seen as a virtuous actor in the market. It's actually about building trust, and trust is a cornerstone of any thriving business. You need to have trust from all the stakeholders interacting with your business, obviously regulators, but also consumers of your systems, investors, civil society at large, potential citizens, and so forth. And as you build the right processes and you demonstrate that your system is trustworthy, you're going to stand apart from the competition, because the need for trust in AI systems is not a trend. As I said, this is the defining factor that will determine who's worth doing business with. Because don't get confused, we're in that transition phase where we struggle to build the right governance processes to distinguish between the most trustworthy and less trustworthy AI systems. But that phase is going to come to an end as AI mature, and the last one standing will be only the trustworthy actors. So that's the end of my presentation. I was really pleased to chat with you today and give you the short keynote. Please, as I said, if you are interested in this work, feel free to reach out. You will have my email address as part of the agenda. You can find me on LinkedIn, and we can have a more detailed discussion as it relates to your company. So thank you for your time, and have a very lovely event today.